The sister-in-law borrowed 20 gold bars, supposedly for a business venture, and the very next day, with tears in her eyes, she reported that they had been stolen. I smirked coldly. It was fake gold. 5 minutes later, I saw 77 missed calls, all demanding compensation. I answered with one phrase that made her collapse to her knees. It was pouring rain that day. Rain lashed against the car's windshield, creating a chilling sensation that seeped into my bones. I had just finished a 12-hour shift at the high-end jewelry store. My feet ached from my high heels, and all I wanted was to get home and take a hot bath. But my husband, Mark, had been calling me since lunch. Drive straight to Mom's. She made your favorite roasted duck with apples. Sarah will be there too. Hearing Sarah's name, my dear sister-in-law, I sighed heavily. An ominous premonition stirred in my chest. Sarah turned 26 this year, an age when she should have a stable job, but she was still living in the clouds. Here today, gone tomorrow, always chasing illusions of quick riches. When I entered the apartment, the appetizing smell of food couldn't quite mask the suffocating atmosphere. My mother-in-law, Susan Davis, sat on the sofa, engrossed in her phone, while Sarah twirled in front of the mirror, trying on a glossy designer handbag. Seeing me, she turned, beaming with a dazzling smile. "Oh, Emily's here. So, what do you think? Does my outfit look expensive? I'm signing a major contract tomorrow." I glanced at the Chanel bag in her hands, then at the expensive silk dress. Shaking my head mentally, I knew perfectly well that these were either rented items or high-quality fakes, but I answered softly, "Very beautiful." "What kind of contract is it for tomorrow?" My polite question came just in time. Sarah plopped down next to me. The sharp scent of her perfume hit my nose. "You wouldn't believe it. I'm about to hit the jackpot. An acquaintance offered me plots in a new upscale community in the Hamptons at an exclusive price. Tomorrow I'm meeting with VIP partners to make the down payment. After this deal, my life will change forever." Dinner was accompanied by Sarah's incessant chatter about millions and billions, about a brilliant future. Mark sat next to her, serving his sister food, his eyes gleaming with blind pride. My mother-in-law just nodded, occasionally interjecting, "See, the girl has business acumen. You and your brother should support her." I silently poked at my plate, swallowing the dry food with difficulty, and tried to convince myself, if I stay silent, the storm will pass. But as the saying goes, if the tree desires calm, the wind will not subside. Towards the end of dinner, Sarah suddenly put down her fork, took my hand, and in an overly sweet voice, said, "Emily, tomorrow I'm meeting with very important people, real tycoons. If I come empty-handed, they won't take me seriously, and will drive down the price." I looked up. My premonition of trouble was confirmed. "And what do you propose?" Sarah took a deep breath and uttered a phrase that made me freeze. "Lend me your 20 gold bars. I'll just take them for credibility, to put on a show. As soon as I sign the contract, I'll return them." 20 investment bars from Chase Bank. These were all my savings from 10 years of work, plus money given by my parents for our wedding. I planned to save them for old age or a rainy day. I put down my cutlery and firmly refused. "No, the gold is in a bank safety deposit box. You can't just take it out in a moment. Besides, it's a huge sum, almost $500,000. Carrying it on the street is simply dangerous." The atmosphere in the room instantly heated up. My mother-in-law slammed her bowl onto the table with force. I flinched at the sharp sound. Susan Davis glared at me maliciously. "She's only asking for one day, not forever." "Why are you so worked up? Are you afraid you'll be robbed in this family? The girl has the chance of a lifetime. As a daughter-in-law, you should help, but all you do is hoard your money." Mark, seeing his mother's anger, quickly turned to me with an imploring and cowardly look. "Emily, help her. I vouch for her. A chance like this comes once in a lifetime. Don't be so selfish." I looked at my husband, a man I saw as my rock, and now he was using his honor to force me to hand over all my savings to his lazy and frivolous sister. "Mark, this is 20 gold bars, almost $500,000, not a head of lettuce. What if something happens?" Hearing her brother's voice, Sarah shed a tear, playing the victim. "Fine. If she doesn't trust me, so be it. I guess it's my fate to miss a chance that literally floated into my hands. Let everyone laugh at me now. Her sniffling added fuel to the fire. Mark grabbed my hand. His voice was firm, but it pressured me. I swear to you, on my word as a man, if she doesn't return it by tomorrow evening, I'll sell a kidney and give you the money. Is that enough? I looked into my husband's eyes and saw not understanding, but cheap posturing and boundless indulgence for his family. In this house, I would forever remain an outsider, a walking ATM, not a united front. Exhaustion overwhelmed me. I understood that if I didn't give in today, I would become enemy number one, the cause of all Sarah's failures, and my future life would turn into a hell full of reproaches. I got up, went to the bedroom, and opened the safe. The gold bars gleamed dully in their green velvet boxes from Chase Bank. I took them. The weight was not only in my hands but also on my soul. Coming into the living room, I placed the box on the table in front of Sarah and said coldly, "Be warned. Tomorrow at exactly 6 p.m., you must return everything to me. If even a gram is missing, I won't let it go." Sarah clutched the box like a drowning person to a life preserver. Her eyes lit up. She instantly forgot her tears. "Thank you, sister-in-law. Don't worry, I'll guard it more than my own life." Mark exhaled in relief, patted my shoulder, and smiled joyfully. "That's my golden wife. When she gets big from this deal, she'll definitely throw us a few thousand for pocket money." I looked at my husband's smile, at his mother's and sister's joy, and inside, a dull but powerful anxiety grew, as if I had thrown my hard-earned money into a bottomless pit with my own hands. My restless sleep was shattered by the piercing ring of the phone. In the morning silence, the sound cut through the air like an alarm. I reached for the nightstand. The screen glowed brightly with Sarah's name. The clock showed 5:17 a.m. My heart lurched. Yesterday's premonition suddenly became reality, squeezing my chest. I swiped my finger across the screen, and before I could say a word, I heard hysterical crying mixed with the sounds of wind and car engines on the other end. "Emily, Emily, help me! I'm ruined, Emily!" Sarah's voice was distorted with panic, like the cry of a wounded animal. Mark, sleeping next to me, flinched, jumped up in bed, rubbing his eyes. What happened? Who's calling so early? I turned on the speakerphone, gripping the phone with trembling hands. "Sarah, calm down. What happened?" Through her sobs, in the quiet bedroom, I clearly heard, "I was robbed. My bag. They snatched my bag. Everything's gone, Emily. All 20 bars. My ears buzzed. It felt as if someone had doused me with boiling water. My body flushed hot, then was overcome with icy cold. My life savings were gone. I had given them to her just last night, and now, less than 10 hours later, they had vanished. Mark turned ashen. He snatched the phone from me and roared, "What are you talking about? Where did they go? Are you okay?" Sarah continued to sob on the other end. I'm standing at an intersection on 5th Avenue. I left early to prepare for my client meeting. And then 2 guys on a motorcycle pinned me against the curb. They pulled so hard, I fell to the asphalt. "Everything's gone, Mark." I sat numb, leaning back against the headboard. But then, amidst my husband's panic and my sister-in-law's hysteria, a strange clarity suddenly awakened within me. I remembered last night. When Sarah took the box, she carelessly tossed it into her open bag without a zipper. This was completely unlike the behavior of someone carrying $500,000. Moreover, having worked as a jewelry store manager for 10 years, I had seen countless people and all sorts of theft situations. Sarah's crying was loud, but it lacked the true despair of someone who had lost everything. It sounded more like the fear of a culprit looking for a way to disclaim responsibility. A daring thought flashed through my mind, like lightning cutting through the night sky. I took a deep breath, calming my frantically beating heart. I snatched the phone from Mark, and my voice sounded unnaturally calm, cold as ice. "Sarah, be quiet and listen to me." On the other end, the crying hitched slightly. Sarah was probably surprised by my calmness. I continued, each word precise as knife strokes. "I forgot to tell you. Fearing that you might carelessly lose the gold on the street, I gave you display samples yesterday. These are fake bars we use in the store's showcases." The space seemed to freeze. Mark's eyes widened, about to say something, but I motioned for him to be silent. I continued speaking into the phone in a comforting tone, but with an icy stare. Inside, they're made of brass, and on top, they're covered with a thin layer of gilding, just for show. Their real value is about $50 per piece. For all of them together, it's pocket change. They were stolen, and thank goodness. Consider it a small price to pay to avoid disaster. The main thing is that you weren't hurt yourself. A sudden silence fell on the other end of the line. The hysterical crying stopped abruptly, as if someone had been choked. The ominous silence lasted several seconds. If Sarah had genuinely been robbed and hadn't had a chance to check her bag, she should have burst into tears of joy upon learning that she hadn't lost a huge sum. She should have screamed, "Thank God!" But no, Sarah's reaction was a dead silence. The silence of a calculating person who had fallen into absolute panic, realizing that she might have pawned a pile of junk at the price of real gold, or, even worse, feared that the bandits would deal with her for fraud. Through Sarah's labored breathing, I seemed to see right through my sister-in-law's rotten soul. "Hello, Sarah, are you there?" I asked, feigning concern. On the other end, there was a stutter. Sarah's voice broke. There was no more suffering in it, only the panic of someone cornered. "What? Fake? Are you serious?" "Absolutely. I'm the manager. I know how to protect valuables. Who would let you walk around with real gold?" I smirked dryly, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. Sarah couldn't utter another word. I heard only a heavy, angry sigh, and then she abruptly hung up. Short beeps echoed endlessly through the cold bedroom. Mark looked at me, stunned, and stammered, Are you serious? Or joking? Is it really fake?" I turned to my husband, and my gaze must have been so frightening that he recoiled into the bed. I didn't answer his question, just silently put down the phone, thinking to myself, the real show is just beginning, my dear sister-in-law. I turned off my phone, placed it face down on the cold kitchen counter, and silently went to make coffee. The kettle boiled. The sound was like a mocking laugh from fate at my naivety. Mark sat on the edge of the bed, holding his head in his hands. His face was so crumpled and suffering, as if he had just had a fortune stolen from him. 5 minutes passed. I held a cup of hot coffee in my hands. Steam rose, clouding my red, sleepless eyes. I picked up my phone. The screen flashed brightly, showing a jarring number. 77 missed calls, all from one person, Sarah. Plus a barrage of voice and text messages, pouring in like machine gun fire. I glanced at Mark, grimaced bitterly, and turned on the speakerphone. The volume was loud enough to break the false silence between us. Sarah's voice erupted, but it was no longer the crying of a frightened robbery victim. It was a piercing shriek, full of anger and rage from someone who felt cheated. "Emily, pick up the phone. How dare you fool me? How dare you give me fake gold? Do you even realize how you've set me up? You're a con artist. You want to kill your own sister-in-law." The next voicemail was even harsher. Sarah's voice was hoarse with fury. "Answer me. Why was it gilded? I lost face in front of these people because of you. What am I supposed to do now? You'll pay for this." I looked at Mark, and his face, from pale, turned crimson. His eyes widened in shock. I slowly took a sip of bitter coffee and, turning to my husband, asked in a tone usually reserved for discussing the weather, "Don't you think this is strange, Mark?" She was just crying that her bag was snatched at the intersection. The robbers hadn't even had time to open the bag. How did she find out the gold inside was fake? Mark froze. His lips moved silently. I delivered another psychological blow. If your bag was snatched and you hadn't had time to check the contents, a normal reaction to the news that the items were fake would be joy. Relief that you hadn't lost millions. But your sister went ballistic, like she'd been scalded, and is even demanding compensation from me. Unless... I paused, allowing Mark to draw his own conclusion. Unless she already took that gold to a pawn shop or to some shady buyers, and they discovered it was a fake, which is why she panicked. Mark swallowed hard, sweat breaking out on his forehead. But the habit of covering for and justifying his sister, ingrained in his blood, made him search for excuses, however pathetic they might be. He stammered uncertainly, No, don't make things up. Maybe when the bag was snatched, the box opened, and she saw it. Or maybe she decided to take it for appraisal for reliability before meeting with partners, and she was robbed on the way. And now you've shamed her. Take responsibility. She's demanding compensation for emotional distress. I laughed aloud. The laugh sounded dry and cold. I understood that in this man's eyes, the fate of my $500,000, earned with blood, sweat, and tears, meant nothing compared to his precious sister's cheap posturing. He didn't feel sorry for me. He felt sorry for his sister, who suffered because she couldn't swindle her sister-in-law. I picked up the phone and called Sarah back. After the first ring, she answered, as if she had been waiting by the screen the entire time. "Emily, explain yourself. Are you trying to mock me?" Sarah yelled so loudly that Mark winced. I replied curtly. My words cut like a razor. "Sarah, if it was a fake, well, fine. You won't have to pay me $500,000. We're family. Why would I count pennies for display samples? Why are you so upset and demanding compensation? Or maybe we can go to the police together and file a report. Let the police find this fake for you." Silence hung on the other end. I could only hear Sarah's heavy breathing. The mention of the police acted like a splash of icy water, extinguishing all her aggression. Sarah mumbled something incoherent and hung up. The dial tone returned. I looked at Mark. He averted his gaze. This clumsy performance they were playing was too deliberate, but unfortunately, I was no longer a naive spectator. That evening, Mark returned from work later than usual. As soon as he crossed the threshold, he slammed his briefcase onto the sofa with a crash. His face was red with anger. I sat folding laundry. Glancing at him, I continued my task, promising myself not to succumb to other people's emotions anymore. Mark went to the kitchen, chugged a glass of cold water, then came up to me and gritted through his teeth. "Are you satisfied? Did you satisfy your ego?" Sarah is lying flat on her back at Mom's. She's in such shock that her blood pressure shot up. We had to call a doctor and put her on an IV. "Why did you lie to her about the fake gold? Do you even realize how much you hurt her?" I put down his shirt, raised my head, and looked him straight in the eyes. In my gaze, there was no longer the usual patience and submissiveness, only irony and defiance. I calmly asked, "Mark, tell me honestly, if the gold was stolen, what difference does it make at that moment, whether it was real or not? How could she know it was fake if she hadn't managed to sell it? And why is she in shock that she won't have to compensate us $500,000? Mark choked, his face reddening. He hesitated, searching for words, nervously pacing the living room, gesticulating. She wanted to take it for appraisal. She's careful. She wanted to make sure before the meeting. That's why she went to the pawn shop. And she was robbed on the way. And she's in shock because she felt betrayed by you. She lost faith in family. Understand? His pathetic and flimsy answer only confirmed my suspicions. No one, after a robbery, worries about whether the stolen item was real, unless they were trying to appropriate it themselves. The gold wasn't lost. Sarah undoubtedly tried to sell or pawn it, and when I said it was fake, she was afraid she had been given a worthless item. I looked at my husband with profound disappointment. "And you believe that nonsense? A person who loses money first runs to the police, but all she does is blame me for a fake. Don't you think that's absurd? Or do you perfectly well know the truth, but continue to cover for your sister?" Mark flinched. He averted his eyes. His tone shifted from aggressive to pleading, a familiar tactic when arguments ran out. "Fine. What's done is done. The gold is gone anyway. Real or not, it can't be recovered. Now, family is what matters. Stop being so suspicious. Tomorrow, go to Mom's and visit Sarah. Apologize so there's peace in the house. Mom is very angry. She says you're heartless and betrayed your relatives." I laughed aloud. My bitter laughter echoed hollowly through the empty room. Apologize? My 20 gold bars were stolen, and now I have to apologize to the one who robbed me. This twisted logic can only exist in your family, where greed is indulged and kindness is ruthlessly trampled. I looked at Mark and shook my head firmly. I didn't do anything wrong. The gold was real. I have all the receipts and certificates. I only lied about it being fake to test her reaction, and you saw the results yourself." Hearing the phrase "the gold was real," Mark brightened. His face changed instantly. "What? Are you serious? Real? Thank God. Then I'll tell her right away to go to the police. Maybe they'll find it." This change disgusted me. He wasn't happy that his wife hadn't lost money. He was happy that the gold still had value, and that his sister didn't end up with a pile of brass. I doused him with icy water. Too late. I told Sarah it was fake, and she firmly believes it. Even if you tell her the truth now, she won't go to the police, unless she wants to go to jail for fraud herself. I turned, walked into the bedroom, and slammed the door shut, leaving Mark standing in the middle of the living room with his chaotic thoughts. That night, I lay curled up in the enormous bed, my back to Mark. His steady snoring sounded like a mockery. He could sleep peacefully after forcing his wife to apologize to a thief. And I didn't close my eyes, suffocating with resentment. In the darkness, memories of all Sarah's previous failures floated before me like a slow-motion film. I remembered last year. Sarah, in tears, begged us for $20,000 to open a bubble tea shop with her friend. I had doubts, knowing her habit of abandoning projects halfway, but Mark insisted, "We need to support her startup." A week after transferring the money, Sarah called, breathless with fear, and reported that the kiosk had been broken into and all the equipment and cash register stolen. My mother-in-law also put on a drama then, cursing fate. I pitied her, swallowed my resentment, deciding it would be a lesson for her. But just 2 days later, I saw Sarah's photo on Instagram from Miami. She stood with a luxurious cocktail, and the caption read, "Rewarding myself after the storms I've weathered." When I asked Mark, he brushed it off, saying her friend paid for the trip so Sarah could clear her head. Now I realize what a fool I was to believe that blatant lie. Or that incident with the family gold ring my mother gave me. Sarah came to visit and begged to wear it to a friend's wedding to look distinguished. The next day, she brought back a ruined ring without its stone, with an unconcerned look. I accidentally dropped it, and it fell apart. "It must be some cheap Chinese junk. Check if your mom scammed you," I cried from resentment. It was my mother's memory, but Mark again cut me off. "Well, it broke. It broke. It wasn't on purpose. Don't pick on your own family." Every time it involved Sarah, accidents and thefts occurred, and I was always the one blamed. Mark kept saying, "We're family, we shouldn't keep score." But he never considered that my tolerance was nurturing her bottomless greed. But this time, it wasn't about $20,000 or a ring. These were 20 gold bars. My life's work. I couldn't close my eyes to it anymore. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, carefully put on my makeup, and donned a sharp business suit. Mark was still sleeping soundly, mumbling something in his sleep. I cast a final glance at him, feeling completely detached. I left a note. "Left for work early, will be home late." In reality, I took the day off. I didn't go to the store. I decided to get to the bottom of the truth. I remembered the place Sarah had chattered about at dinner. An upscale community in the Hamptons, near the Sterling Academy private school. Prices are skyrocketing. That's where she was supposedly going to meet with partners. If the deal was real, there should be a sales office, a construction site. If not, the show would end right there on the set. I drove through the autumn streets of New York. Familiar avenues flashed by outside the window, but my thoughts were focused on one thing: tearing off the masks of those who cold-bloodedly drank the blood of their own relatives. I stopped at the address Sarah had so enthusiastically described, turned off the engine. Before my eyes, there was no luxurious glass real estate office, no beautiful models, as she had claimed. Instead, a shabby roadside diner on the edge of a wasteland. Weeds grew all around. The breeze carried the smell of dampness and manure. A crooked, faded sign, "The Diner," swayed on a rickety pole. I went inside. The diner was empty. Only the owner was swatting flies away from pastries. "Excuse me, may I ask?" I began. The woman looked me up and down. "Is there an elite real estate project or agency nearby?" The owner laughed loudly, revealing her nicotine-stained teeth. "Oh, you made me laugh, honey. There's never been any elite stuff in this backwater. It's all swamps and farmland here. In spring, It floods up to your knees. Who would even permit building here? Did some scamming real estate agents con you? My breath caught. Just as I suspected, no projects, no VIP partners. It was all Sarah's cheap performance to lure out my gold. I bought a bottle of water, sat on an old plastic chair, and tried to calm down, but that wasn't all. I remembered Sarah boasting that with money from a previous deal, she had enrolled her son, Kevin, in the Sterling Academy private school nearby. I decided to go all the way. I drove another 2 miles to the school, a magnificent building with European architecture, where a year's tuition costs more than an average person earns in several years. At the admissions office, I pretended to be a mother choosing a school and casually asked about Kevin, Sarah's son from the first grade. The girl in admissions kindly checked the database, typing quickly on her keyboard. A couple of minutes later, she smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry, I've checked everything. There's no student named Kevin with that last name in the entire school. And no Sarah among the parents either. You must have confused the school." I walked out the gates, feeling as if I was floating in a crowd, but utterly alone. The bright sun flooded the schoolyard, children's laughter could be heard, but inside me there was only a gray emptiness. It turned out all the stories of success, of multi-million-dollar contracts, of a luxurious life that Sarah and my mother-in-law boasted about. It was all soap bubbles. They were beautiful, shimmering in the sun, but they burst at the slightest touch. Sarah used my trust and kindness to feed her illusions. She deceived not only me but also herself, living in a fabricated world. I walked away from the school with an utterly devastated heart. Suddenly, a white car sped past me. The sound of a powerful engine sharply contrasted with the street noise. It was a brand new Mercedes-Benz GLC. The gleaming white paint blinded my eyes. A transit paper from the dealership still hung on the rear window. I squinted, a familiar silhouette behind the wheel. That manner of casually resting his arm on the open window. How much he resembled David, Sarah's husband. I started my car and followed him, keeping my distance so as not to be noticed, but seeing everything clearly. The car stopped at a red light at an intersection. I drove closer to the next lane. Through the slightly open window, I saw David, nodding his head to the loud music, stylish dark sunglasses on his nose. But what struck me most wasn't the car worth several $100,000, but my brother-in-law's incredible transformation. David had always been known in the family as a sloppy idler, wearing a faded t-shirt and flip-flops year-round, constantly complaining about unemployment and debts. And now, on his wrist, carelessly resting on the window, a gold Rolex gleamed. His hair was slicked back with gel. Simply a newly minted tycoon. The light turned green. The car sped off, leaving me stunned in a cloud of dust. An unemployed man whose wife cried yesterday about losing $500,000 today drives around town in a brand new foreign car. If this was a coincidence, only a complete idiot would believe it. I gripped the steering wheel tightly. Anger flared up with renewed force, burning away all remaining doubts. My gold wasn't stolen. It wasn't lost. It had turned into this luxurious car, into David's arrogant face. They didn't just steal my savings. They trampled my trust and the familial feelings I tried to maintain. I decided not to go home. I would follow this car. I wanted to know what other show they would put on with my hard-earned money. The car pulled into the underground parking lot of an upscale shopping mall, like the Grove. I parked, pulled my cap lower, and quickly headed for the elevator. My journey to unmask these so-called relatives had begun. The mall dazzled with luxury, warm lighting tones, and the faint scent of expensive perfumes, a place for the elite to enjoy, utterly alien to honest hard workers like me. I saw David emerge from the elevator. A swaggering walk, hands in pockets, an arrogant and smug gaze. He headed straight to a designer handbag boutique, where even a tiny wallet costs as much as my monthly salary. I hid behind a marble column, my heart pounding, pulled out my phone, and started recording video. David pointed a finger at a black bag in the display. The consultant immediately rushed to get it, showering him with courtesies. He didn't even glance at the price tag, nodded, and pulled a thick wad of cash from his pocket. His way of throwing money around would have made anyone gasp. After paying, David left with the package and immediately started a video call. I tiptoed closer to hear. His loud voice echoed through the empty corridor. My beloved wife. I bought the bag you wanted. The black one. Exactly. Damn the money. The main thing is for you to be happy. On the phone screen, I briefly saw Sarah's face. She was laughing from ear to ear. Not a single sign of grief over lost money or panic over fake gold. Her clear voice replied, I adore you, my man. Come back soon. Mom made dinner, and don't forget to buy a good bottle of cognac. We need to celebrate. Celebrate? They were celebrating on my bones. Celebrating that they had tricked a fool like me. A lump rose in my throat. I bit my lip until it bled to keep from bursting into tears. I had been too kind, too trusting, and now I stood here, watching this circus. Yesterday's tragic victims today revealed their true nature. Cold-blooded con artists. I turned off the camera, saving the video as evidence, and with trembling hands, dialed Mike's number. Mike was my former classmate, now working in the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, the person I trusted most in this situation. After a few rings, his calm voice answered. Hello, Emily, what's wrong? Why are you calling at this hour? I took a deep breath, suppressing my emotions. Mike, I need your help. I think I've been the victim of a major fraud, and the perpetrators are my husband's family. A pause hung on the other end, then Mike's voice became stern. Calm down and tell me, do you have evidence? If it's relatives, it's a complicated case, but there are no untouchables for the law. I briefly told him everything, from the borrowed gold to the fake robbery, the new car, and the luxurious purchases. Mike listened carefully and instructed me on how to properly gather evidence through legal channels. Hanging up, I looked at my reflection in the store window. My eyes were red, but they burned with an unyielding determination. I returned home after dark, bringing with me printed photos of David in the Mercedes-Benz GLC and the video on my phone. Mark was sitting in the living room in front of the TV. Seeing me, he threw the remote and said reproachfully, Where have you been until now? Dinner's not ready, Mom called, said you should come apologize to Sarah, and you're ignoring her? What kind of behavior is this? I didn't answer. I walked up to him and slammed a stack of photos onto the table. David behind the wheel of a new foreign car. David buying a designer bag. The photos scattered across the table, revealing the naked truth that Mark had so stubbornly ignored. He picked up a photo, squinted, then frowned. What's this? You are following David? And whose car is this? I sat opposite him and gave him an icy stare. It's your brother-in-law's new car, still without license plates. And the bag in his hands, bought this afternoon, costs several $1,000s. Maybe you can explain where an unemployed man, whose wife cried yesterday about losing $500,000, gets the money for a tycoon's spending habits. Mark froze. His face changed color. But very quickly, the blind instinct to defend his family awakened. He threw the photos onto the table and snarled, You're at it again. Nothing else to do, I guess. Maybe he won the lottery, or took out a loan to drive for Uber. Stop seeing ulterior motives everywhere. You're so petty. I laughed dryly and disappointedly. Lottery? Loan? Do you really believe that absurdity? Took a loan for a car for Uber and went to buy his wife a $2,000 bag. Are you pretending to be an idiot? Or do you really think I'm a fool? Mark jumped up, pointing a finger at me, his face red with anger. Shut up. Stop making things up. Sarah is sick at home. She's heartbroken over losing the money. If you have no heart, at least don't look for dirt where there isn't any. Do you want to cause a rift between me and my family? Do you want to destroy our marriage? These ridiculous accusations cut me to the heart like a knife. Apparently, in my husband's eyes, my attempts to find the truth were looking for dirt. The truth didn't matter to him. Anyone who touched his mother or sister was an enemy, even if it was his own wife. I stood up and looked at him as if he were a complete stranger. Fine. Continue to believe in your perfect family. But know this, I won't stop. These 20 gold bars are my hard work, and I will get them back at any cost, even if I have to drag your entire family through court. Hearing the word court, Mark turned pale, but tried to save the last vestiges of his pride. Just try it. I won't forgive you for this. I didn't bother to answer this pathetic threat. I just went into the bedroom and locked the door. The next morning, I went to the market, bought fruit, and some broth. I pretended I was going to visit the sick, but in reality, I was infiltrating their lair. Sarah and David lived in my mother-in-law's old 2-story house. I rang the doorbell and waited. The door opened slowly. Sarah poked her head out, disheveled, pale, without makeup, clearly playing the role of a gravely ill person, but seeing me, a flicker of panic crossed her eyes. She held the door tightly, not letting me in. "Why are you here?" she asked warily. I held up the bag of fruit and smiled sweetly. "Mark said you were very sick. I was so worried. I brought you some broth for strength. Let me in, it's cold outside." Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting around. She was clearly calculating something. "Go home, Emily. I don't feel well. I want to sleep. And the house is a mess. I can't have guests." Her pathetic excuses only strengthened my suspicions. Something inside was surely hidden that I wasn't supposed to see. I didn't give up. I hunched over, clutching my stomach. Oh no, my stomach just cramped up. I must have gotten food poisoning from that street food. "Sarah, please, just let me use the bathroom for a minute. I'm begging you, I can't hold it." I played so convincingly, bent double, that Sarah was afraid I would make a mess right on her porch and reluctantly opened the door. Fine, but be quick." I squeezed inside and deliberately slowed my pace as I passed the living room. What I saw shocked me, even though I was prepared. Amidst the clutter stood a huge, empty box from a brand new 6.5-inch flat-screen TV. They hadn't even had time to throw it out. On the coffee table, instead of medicine for the sick, expensive bottles of Chivas and Macallan whiskey, plates of cold cuts, and imported sweets were proudly displayed. Seeing me stare at all of this, Sarah rushed towards me, threw a tablecloth over the alcohol, and kicked the TV box into the corner, screaming hysterically, "What are you looking at? I told you the house was a mess. Go to the bathroom and get out. How tactless of you, barging into someone else's house and snooping around." I stood and looked at my sister-in-law's pathetic panic, smirking to myself. A person bedridden with grief over lost millions is drinking elite whiskey and watching movies on a giant screen. These luxury items screamed their lies. I no longer needed the bathroom. I turned to Sarah and said sharply, "My stomach feels better. Thank you. Thanks to you, I now know that the sick in your family are treated with elite cognac and new flat-screen TVs." Having said that, I turned and walked to the door, leaving Sarah standing with a face as white as chalk. I had gotten everything I wanted. Another puzzle piece had fallen into place in this picture of family fraud. As soon as I walked out of Sarah's rusty gate, still processing what I had seen, an electric scooter screeched to a halt beside me. Dust billowed into the air, obscuring the woman's face. But by that authoritative, arrogant posture, I would have recognized her even in complete darkness. Susan Davis, my mother-in-law. She slammed the scooter's kickstand down and marched towards me. Her face was contorted with fury, completely unlike the image of a virtuous mother she usually presented. She glared at me, her gaze like a knife, not even bothering to ask what I was doing there. Instead, she immediately pointed a finger in my face and hissed, "Why did you come here? To collect debts from my daughter? Or do you want to drive her to her grave to be satisfied?" I froze, gripping my purse strap tightly to suppress a tremor. I looked at the woman I had called Mom for 5 years, whom I respected and supported, and now she appeared in her true light, a ruthless defender of thieves. I took a deep breath and answered in a steady voice, "Mom, I just came to visit Sarah. They said she was very sick. I'm her sister-in-law. It's normal to visit and check on her." Susan Davis chuckled venomously. Her laugh echoed down the quiet street. "Visit? Don't pretend to be a saint. You came here to snoop, to ferret out if she hid your gold. I know your paranoid nature perfectly well." She came closer. The cheap cologne she wore wafted from her. Her voice lowered but became even more menacing. "Mark my words. The loss of the gold was an accident. Bad luck. She's already consumed with grief. Don't you dare corner her. Fear God. Live with a conscience, so your children won't pay for it later." The word conscience, coming from her lips, sounded like a slap in the face. What twisted logic, I looked her straight in the eyes and asked, "You say I'm cornering Sarah? And who cornered me? Leaving me without $500,000. That's my blood, sweat, and tears from my entire life. You're telling me to live with a conscience. Where is your conscience towards me?" Susan Davis's eyes bulged, red with anger. Apparently, she didn't expect her always submissive daughter-in-law to suddenly put up such a fight. She trembled and growled, "You wretch! How dare you talk back to me? Ungrateful. Let me tell you this. If you ever dare to cause another scandal or, God forbid, utter a word about court, I will personally kick you out of our family. I'll make Mark divorce you and throw you out of the house. My house will not tolerate a daughter-in-law who values money more than family ties." This threat acted like an ice-cold shower, but it finally sobered me up completely. Apparently, my place in this family was so insignificant. The moment I touched upon her daughter's interests, I instantly became an enemy to be destroyed. She was willing to sacrifice her son's marriage and happiness just to make me swallow this theft. I looked at my mother-in-law with an utterly cold heart. I didn't scream or plead, just gave a barely perceptible smirk and said lightly, "Fine. Since you said so, I heard you. But remember your words today very well." Turning, I walked away, leaving Susan Davis sputtering curses behind me. My heart was heavy, but my mind was clearer than ever. The ties between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, that illusion of a happy family, shattered into smithereens today. 3 days after the confrontation at the gate, a ringing silence hung in our house. Mark returned sullen, avoided me, and I didn't try to talk to him. But on Saturday evening, his phone rang. After a short conversation, he turned to me and said hesitantly, "Mom's inviting us for dinner. She wants to make up. Says she got carried away last time. Said too much." I looked at him, perfectly understanding. This wasn't a family dinner. It was a trap, a feast of predators. But I agreed. I wanted to see what other show they would put on after all the threats, and I needed an official platform to unmask them in front of everyone. We arrived after dark. The apartment glowed with lights. The clinking of dishes came from the kitchen. Entering the living room, I saw an incredibly ironic scene. Sarah and David sat casually on a leather sofa. Their faces were fresh, rosy, and nothing like sick or grieving people. Seeing me, Sarah jumped up with a fake smile. "Oh, Emily's here. Come in, sit down. Mom made seafood tonight. Just how you like it." I glanced at her and stopped at the hand she was waving in front of my face. On her ring finger, a dazzling diamond ring sparkled. Its light seemed like a mockery. I suppressed a sigh and sat opposite her. David was no less ostentatious. He wore a designer Burberry shirt with sleeves rolled up, clearly to show off his massive gold Rolex. Noticing my gaze, he quickly pulled down his sleeve and chuckled nervously. "Oh, this? It's a replica. Got it at the flea market for pennies, just for show. Where would I get money for a real one?" I smiled coldly with obvious undertones. "Yes, it looks very high quality, just like the original in a magazine for a few $100,000. You have excellent taste, David. A replica, yet you look like a real tycoon." David's face twitched, his smile froze. He awkwardly grabbed a cup of tea to hide his embarrassment. Then Susan Davis came out of the kitchen with a steaming dish, declaring loudly, "All right, talk later. Let's eat. We're all here today. Let's forget old grievances and eat in peace." Dinner passed in a stuffy, strained atmosphere. The table groaned under the weight of king crabs, lobsters, fresh calamari, expensive delicacies that my mother-in-law would never have bought in her life. Looking at this feast, I wondered, where did the money come from? Wasn't it from my gold bars that they were now feasting? I ate, but the food tasted bitter, like wormwood. My mother-in-law constantly served me food with an overly sweet tone. "Emily, eat. You've lost so much weight. I know you're upset about that gold, but money is water. The important thing is that everyone is alive. In a family, you have to know how to give in, daughter." I put down my fork and scanned the faces at the table. These faces. Some smiled falsely. Some behaved brazenly. Some timidly lowered their eyes. They were all playing a show with my pain. The atmosphere at the table hung in a false silence. I could only hear David loudly slurping his soup. I realized it was time to break this shell. I slowly wiped my lips with a napkin, looked Sarah directly in the eyes, and in a calm, clear voice, said, "Sarah, I don't want to dig up the past and cause pain, but yesterday I called the insurers from our store. They said that in case of a theft of such a large sum, if there's a police report, you can get some compensation." My words fell on the table like a grenade. Sarah, who was gnawing on a crab claw, froze. The claw plopped into the sauce. Splashes flew everywhere. Susan Davis stopped chewing. Her chopsticks trembled. Mark sharply raised his head, looking at me with a mixture of surprise and fear. I went on the offensive, giving them no time to recover. "So, send me a photo of the police report. I'll send it to the insurance company. Maybe we can get at least some of the money back." Sarah swallowed hard. Her face went from red to white. She stammered, I lost that paper. I was in such a panic that day. The police gave me something. I threw it at home and forgot where." I smiled, softly, but with a predator's eyes. "How can you lose such an important document?" "Well, it's no big deal. If you don't remember, I'll go to the station myself and ask for a copy." "Which precinct did you file the report at? Midtown, North, or somewhere else? So, I know where to go." Sarah started to sweat profusely. She glanced furtively at her husband, seeking salvation, then at her mother. My mother-in-law, realizing her daughter was cornered, slammed her cutlery onto the table and blurted out, "Why are you harassing her with this paper? She said she lost it, so she lost it. Those insurance people are all scammers. Don't waste your time." I didn't back down. I turned to my mother-in-law with a firm gaze. "Mom, it's procedure. $500,000 is a huge sum. The police are obligated to open a criminal case. Wherever Sarah filed a report, it's in the archives. It didn't just disappear." Then, back to my sister-in-law. "Sarah, answer me. Which precinct? Or did you not go to the police at all?" The last question struck directly at their guilty consciences. Sarah lowered her head, fidgeting with the edge of the tablecloth. Her shoulders trembled. A heavy, suffocating silence hung in the room. Only the rapid breathing of each person present could be heard. Mark, feeling the tension rise, rushed to intervene, but his voice sounded pathetic. "Emily, that's enough. We're eating. Why did you bring up the police? You're ruining our appetite. I'll look for that paper myself tomorrow. Let's just have dinner." I looked at my husband with utter disgust. He continued to cover for them, continued to shield this blatant lie. Did they think I was a fool? Did they think by staying silent, they could get away with it? I scanned their downcast faces and thought, since you're afraid to tell the truth, I'll say it for you. I reached for my purse and pulled out my phone, preparing to deliver the decisive blow. This dinner would be the most unforgettable of their lives. A dinner bitter with truth. Seeing my phone, Sarah looked up, her eyes full of tears, and started her usual hysterical broken record. "Emily, you're going too far. I told you I lost the paper. Why are you pressuring me? If you don't believe me, just say so. Stop beating around the bush. Why would I deceive you? I'm so hurt by your words." My mother-in-law immediately joined in, banging on the table. "Exactly. The girl has suffered enough, and instead of support, you're interrogating her like a criminal. This is a madhouse, not a family." Mark snapped at me irritably. "Emily, put away your phone. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. Why cause a scandal for no reason? Will you let people eat or not?" I looked at the trio, ganging up against me, and felt absolute calm. The anger and pain had burned out, leaving only contempt and determination. I silently pressed a button and connected my phone to the huge smart TV hanging on the wall. The TV screen flashed brightly, displaying my phone's screen. All three stared at the screen, bewildered, not understanding what I was up to. I opened my gallery and displayed a screenshot from Facebook that I had managed to take before Sarah deleted it. "Attention on the screen," I said. My cold voice cut through the dead silence of the room. This photo was posted by Sarah on Facebook on Tuesday at 8 p.m., which is the day after she reported the robbery. It was published only for friends, so Mom and Mark probably didn't see it. But I have a dummy account that's friends with her. On the 65-inch screen, A luxurious table with seafood in a five-star restaurant was clearly displayed. Sarah smiled happily, holding a glass of wine, and the caption read, "Rewarding myself with a fantastic dinner. Life is long, we're young, living it up 100%. Now look closely at the lower left corner of the photo." I pointed a finger at the screen and zoomed in on the detail. In the corner of the table, half hidden by a Red Lobster shell, lay a dark green rectangular box with Chase Bank embossed in gold, the very box that contained my 20 gold bars. Sarah said her bag was snatched on Monday morning. Everything was completely stolen. I turned to Sarah. Her face was whiter than chalk. Her mouth hung open, but she couldn't utter a sound. "Then why, on Tuesday evening, is this box casually sitting on your restaurant table? Did the robber have a conscience, take the gold, and return the box to you so you could carry it around to restaurants for show?" A dead silence hung in the room. Susan Davis's eyes were wide as she stared at the TV, then at her precious daughter. Her hands trembled, and her chopsticks clattered to the floor. Mark stared fixedly at the green box on the screen. Sweat poured down his face. He understood that any excuses were now meaningless in the face of this irrefutable evidence. The photograph, which Sarah wanted to use to boast about her luxury life, had become a noose around her neck. The contrast between the crying victim and the swaggering fraudster was presented in the most ruthless way. The green box silently screamed the truth they had tried to hide for so long. The air in the living room seemed to have been sucked out by a vacuum. Sarah sat pressed into the sofa, her makeup-flushed face turned deathly pale. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape. I stood straight, pointing at the TV, and my steel voice broke the silence. "Sarah, answer me. You said you were robbed, that you were left without a penny. Why do you have the box?" My question was like a dagger to their black hearts. Sarah opened and closed her mouth, gasping for breath. Drops of sweat smeared her thick layer of makeup. Mark sat next to her, clenching his hands until his knuckles turned white. He stared in terror at the evidence he could no longer ignore. After a moment of shock, Susan Davis suddenly turned purple with rage. Apparently, the shame of exposure erupted into mad fury. She jumped up, grabbed a bowl of hot soup, and hurled it straight at me. You're spying on your sister? What kind of sister-in-law are you? Digging up dirt on your own family?" The ceramic bowl shattered at my feet. Hot broth splattered my clothes and legs. It hurt, but this physical pain was nothing compared to what I felt in my soul. Susan Davis didn't even ask her daughter if it was true. Her first reaction was to attack me, to accuse me of daring to expose their dirty laundry. She pointed her finger at me, spitting saliva through her teeth. "So what if she has the box? She kept it for memory. Is that forbidden? Do you think our family needs your pennies? I didn't raise my children for some trash to humiliate them. Get out. Get out of my house. My house won't tolerate a traitor daughter-in-law who pokes her nose into other people's business." I looked at this screaming woman, and nausea rose in my throat. This was the morality in this house. Fraudsters were protected, and those who sought justice were branded traitors. I shifted my gaze to Mark, hoping he would say at least one word in my defense, stop his mother's madness. But no, he just lowered his head, not daring to look up, then stood, roughly grabbed my arm, and dragged me towards the door. "That's it. Leave. Don't cause a scandal. Mom's blood pressure is up." Mark pulled me out of the apartment to the accompaniment of Susan Davis's curses, shoved me into the passenger seat of the car, and slammed the door shut. He got behind the wheel, started the engine, and sped away, leaving behind the dim lights of the house I once considered my second family. The air in the car was so suffocating that I could hear my own erratic heartbeat and my husband's heavy, irritated breathing. After driving a couple of blocks, Mark spoke. There wasn't a hint of remorse in his voice, only endless reproaches. "Satisfied? We were sitting peacefully. Did you absolutely have to blow up a scandal at a family dinner? Don't you know how to help Mom and Sarah save face? Mom almost collapsed there. Are you happy now?" I turned to my husband, looking at him as if he were an alien. He had just seen his mother throw hot soup at his wife, seen clear evidence of his sister's fraud, and his first words were, "You didn't help us save face." I smirked bitterly. Face? Do you think it gives me pleasure to expose you all to ridicule? You yourselves cornered me. Your greed and lies destroyed your honor, not me. I'm just protecting what belongs to me. Mark slammed his fist on the steering wheel and shouted, I saw everything, I'm not blind. But you have to understand my situation. Even if she took them, it was out of desperation. Sarah is in debt. Creditors were hounding her. She panicked. That's why she did something foolish to save herself. We're the older ones. We should help her cover it up just this once. Money can be earned, but ruined family relationships can't be restored. Mark's words were the final blow, severing the thin thread that still bound us. Out of desperation, a person in despair buys a car for hundreds of thousands, bags for thousands, and eats lobsters? And cover it up just this once? $500,000 is my life. And he talks about it as if it's nothing. For him, my money is a common fund for his parasitic family, and my pain isn't worth a dime. I looked Mark straight in the eyes and answered in an absolutely calm voice. You're right. Money can be earned, but respect and trust can never be restored. You're afraid to ruin relationships with your brother and sister, but you're willing to trample your own marriage. You chose them. You chose to cover up evil. You are no longer worthy of being my husband. The car stopped at a traffic light. I opened the door and decisively got out. Mark was stunned, leaned out the window, and shouted after me, Where are you going? Let's go home. We'll talk normally. Don't act like a child. I didn't turn around, just threw into the cold evening air. I'm going to my parents. I'm sick of your house and sick of you. I hailed a taxi, huddled in the back seat, and watched the lights of downtown NYC blur through my tears. I wasn't crying about money. I was crying about myself, about lost youth given to a spineless man and his rotten family. Today, I would return to where I was loved simply for who I was, to find a little warmth after this icy storm. The morning sun broke through a gap in the curtains, hitting my eyes. I squinted, surveying my childhood room, the old desk, the neatly arranged books on the shelf. The feeling of peace was fleeting. Reality quickly hit me. Yesterday's argument, Sarah's brazen face, Mark's cowardice. Mom, noticing I was awake, brought a plate of hot oatmeal. She looked at me with concern, but didn't ask unnecessary questions. Eat, honey, while it's hot, or you'll be late for work. I managed to eat a couple of spoonfuls when the phone rang. Mike. My heart lurched, a premonition telling me there was news. I hastily picked up the receiver. Mike's voice sounded cheerful. Emily, I have news. Just as you suspected, I found a trace of the gold. My hands trembled. The spoon clattered into the plate. Really? Where? Who sold it? I peppered him with questions. Mike began to explain clearly. Using the Chase Bank gold bar numbers you gave me, I asked the guys to check major gold buyers and pawn shops. This morning, the owner of Golden Standard Pawn in the next district confirmed that he bought that batch. The surveillance cameras clearly show a guy on a scooter wearing a mask, but when he had to show his ID to get the money, he pulled the mask down. I held my breath, waiting for the name, though 90% of me already knew the answer. And who was it? David, your sister-in-law's husband. He brought the 20 bars on Tuesday around 9 a.m., that is, right after the night you gave them to her and before they started going to restaurants. The pawn shop owner made a copy of his ID. The transaction amounted to about $450,000. He sold them slightly below market value to get cash immediately. Hearing this, I felt my legs give way. I had to grab the edge of the table. Although I was prepared, the naked truth still knocked me off my feet. David, that brother-in-law who always pretended to be foolish, turned out to be the one who sold my gold. And Sarah was the mastermind, concocting the robbery story. Emily, are you listening? Mike asked, concerned. I took a deep breath, suppressing my anger. I hear you, Mike. Thank you so much. Is this enough to put them away? More than enough. Camera footage, ID details, bar numbers. This is grand larceny, fraud in an especially large amount, committed by a group of individuals. I'll send you all the materials. What do you plan to do? I looked out the window, where trees swayed in the wind. The truth had surfaced. I was no longer the selfish, paranoid woman my mother-in-law and husband screamed at. My gaze became as hard as steel. I won't leave them in peace, Mike. They will pay for every penny stolen and for every tear I shed. I didn't act immediately. I met Mike at a quiet coffee shop away from the precinct to pick up the documents. He handed me a thick folder. Inside were clear camera shots, a copy of the pawn shop receipt with David's signature, and, most importantly, a money flow scheme that Mike had managed to trace. "Look here," he said, pointing to a bank statement. "They're not fools, and they didn't act out of desperation, as your husband claimed. The plan was meticulously thought out." I peered at the numbers, and a chill ran down my spine. After getting the cash from the pawn shop, they didn't put all $450,000 into one account to avoid attracting the attention of financial monitoring. They split the amount. David drove to 3 different bank branches that same morning, Mike explained. He deposited $250,000 into his own account. Then Sarah deposited $100,000 into her card, and they kept the remaining. eBay, Ling, everyone, and had of the word expand in grind Talfit, action and taste, Askanik, and 25 described date, and with Eunice Allo, 18 trusted blyer, at a Vawer, H2 bling, later of the tellering, it say, as an in it, and Iyer Zeph, 1, very high did this work weigh, AP 18. Divin has not rest, Tal vert, it's not much take it video. I have not rather, I have a graded, and discreet, and ever, add a day. 1 times elf, die way, it's climbs of another process, 18 at ostavidinga, and x possibles, it's telgen, absibly, it's not a visnextine. I ev again it, tick 7, added is friend, and the resinus, 81. In modested, it's snacks to fader, and quote in everyone, 85 also, exceptor. Enter not comment, and affected, it stays that. If you intel drift, added is 5 or said. Take you 15, it's derifies, and for the 25, it's derify. It's at apon, and David it. It's not from opsively other tenses, and this is the stom, action, intelliver graded, included bill destared. In rest apsid, it's sumber, and disformorment, after and waited. What of there, and on the what? Do things remated. Activation, dalities 9, epidus. And her 1, it's technated as zav embedded, afficated, tensure, and how is no. I don't, 18. It's must, it's now out of did. Every 510. APS, right now, acts as the 40. In the sans is the sans of him. It's really telled as the sand of now. R10, axt, and axivide, Reitman explains the difference. F10, it's statter. In can. Dash com. In there over. If you not trav, axuras. Alavet. Acher now. Hake. I am sec. It's the disidineressa. Acted it. Effer 15. Is of action. It's did action. It's the passided. It's printing his modiments. Right Kenevin 2000. And NDFet. Ask. He sat of town's day. 8. Amwa. Dachin absence. Offigated absence. He difference. It is not about. Excepinaded. You never place. People 40 woed. In another 82. Acher one so. And. Laxed. At. Explans remended. Everyone. IFTS. 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 Ekatiktamand. And Arwansas. Aiton, inequisted, is parted might as clo, well is, adigraded. It's frenner, AT9, it's not no. It's braid intimidations, makes the forces. It's spreed, and 80, and exgram, 18-7, in the restmen. It was rock, in devountic, action divided. I would it id, and to stan. That one reported fiver look, anderfest, rest protecting. And tenuetter, and discombining, out of IS, 2000 right, and his next device, Tix division, and has been a stayed, ever, in into the start as forded, an experient, basically love than offidus, it's nobody n, one pride it, and ask by one, SXSS, 8 my danner, and commentated on a Kristen Tuzer. Tector, Medigli, given it. Lissus. 2-3. In taxin. 100,000 in cash to splurge. I remembered the $1,000 bag, the lobster dinner. All paid for with that cash. Money they considered a gift from heaven after Zwindling Nevester-in-law. 250,000. From David's account, almost immediately went to the car dealership as a down payment for that Mercedes-Benz GLC you saw. And Sarah's $100,000 is still sitting there dormant, Mike added. This is classic money laundering. These dry figures were ironclad proof of their crime. They weren't just greedy, they were cruel and calculating. Mark's phrase about them doing something foolish out of desperation now sounded like a hilarious joke. This was a conspiracy. Mike, thank you. The weapon is in my hands. I'm going to Mark now. We'll see if he dares to cover for his rotten family after this. I arranged to meet Mark at an inconspicuous cafe, far from their utterly deceitful house. Mark was 15 minutes late, looking agitated. Dark circles were under his eyes, either from insomnia or from the thoughts tormenting him. I silently pushed the thick folder towards him. The rustle of pages sounded louder than the background jazz music. Mark, with trembling hands, flipped through the pawn shop, photos, receipts, bank statements. His face changed colors from crimson to deathly white. These dry facts stripped him of any last possibility to excuse his relatives. He threw the folder on the table, clutching his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. I thought he would explode with anger, run off to punch his brother-in-law, or at least sincerely apologize to me. But no. Cowardice was ingrained in his spinal cord. Raising his red eyes to me, he whined, "Emily, I know they're guilty. But understand Sarah, she was pressured. She owes a ton of money to loan sharks. Interest was accruing every day. They threatened to kill the whole family. She panicked and came up with this plan to pay them off and save our lives." Listening to this, I felt disappointment turn into physical nausea. I smirked with chilling calm. Ours loan sharks? So she blew $250,000 on a new luxury car, stashed $100,000 in an account, and bought designer bags and ate lobsters with the rest. You yourself look at these statements, or have you decided to voluntarily blind yourself to keep covering their butts? Mark choked, but continued to cling to his twisted family logic. Well, maybe she kept some of the money to start a business, to pay off debts later. Have pity on her, Emily. Consider it that you lent her this gold to save her from the loan sharks. I swear, I'll make them write you an IOU. I'll personally monitor their income until they return every penny. If you put her in jail, Mom won't survive it. My patience finally snapped. I abruptly stood up and looked Mark straight in the eyes. Wake up, Mark. This isn't a debtor's desperation. This is organized fraud. Do you want me to give 10 years of my blood, sweat, and tears to pay for your sister's pretentiousness and laziness? Mark my words. I am not a charity fund, and my kindness is not a doormat to be wiped on. Mark jumped up, grabbed my hand. His voice trembled. I beg you, don't file a police report. I'll do anything you say. Just don't ruin Sarah's life. She has a child. We have an elderly mother. I flung his hand off in disgust and hissed. You want me not to go to the police? Fine. Let Sarah come meet me with all the receipts and documents confirming where the money went. If I see a genuine effort, I'll consider it. If not, don't be offended if I act harshly. I turned and left the cafe, leaving Mark to drown in the helplessness born of his own cowardice. By agreement with Mark, my meeting with Sarah took place the next day at an expensive restaurant in downtown New York. I arrived on time. I had to wait about 15 minutes. Finally, Sarah appeared in all her glory. She wore that same expensive dress and the brand new Chanel handbag David had bought a couple of days ago. Judging by her arrogant, unhurried gait, no one would have thought she was a debtor hiding from loan sharks or a fraudster exposed by her own sister-in-law. Sarah pulled out a chair and sat opposite me. No hello, not a trace of remorse or fear. She plopped her bag on the table, called the waiter, ordered fresh orange juice, and only then deigned to look at me with a crooked smirk. Mark said you wanted to talk about returning the debt? Goodness, why so much drama? We're family. I'm not going anywhere. Looking at her shameless face, I barely suppressed the rage boiling inside me. I calmly replied, I didn't come here to listen to your foolish excuses. The money from the sold gold. Where did you spend it? How much is left? Return the remainder to me right now. And for the missing amount, I'm giving you 1 month to find it. Sarah let out a ringing laugh. Her laugh was so piercing that people at nearby tables began to turn their heads. She pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her bag and carelessly tossed it in front of me. Well, there's no money left. I paid off debts, invested in a business, and bought a few small things so I wouldn't be ashamed in front of people. So my pockets are empty. If you want your debt, take this. I picked up the paper. It was an IOU, handwritten in a shaky, illegible scrawl. The content stunned me not with fear, but with amazement at this person's boundless audacity. The note read, I, Sarah, owe Emily $500,000. I promise to pay $100 monthly. Payment term, 83 years. I looked up at Sarah, unable to believe what I had just read. Are you kidding me? $100 a month for 83 years? You're going to be paying me this debt when I'm already in my grave? Sarah shrugged with an unconcerned look. Well, these are my capabilities, so that's what I'll pay. You're rich. You earn thousands a month. Mark also makes good money. Are you stingy with these pennies for your own sister-in-law? The fact that I even wrote an IOU is already a great deal of respect for you. Usually, when people go bankrupt, they just disappear, and there's nothing you can do to them. She leaned forward, lowering her voice, with a clear challenge in it. Besides, Mark already agreed. He said you'd understand my situation. If you don't take this paper, fine. Consider that I don't owe you anything. Go ahead, sue me. I have no property, no accounts in my name. What will you do to me? Looking at her smug face, I realized how wrong I was to believe that such people could be reasoned with amicably. My yielding nature, Mark's cover-ups, and my mother-in-law's indulgence had turned her into a monster, completely devoid of conscience and morality. This IOU was not a promise to return a debt, but a slap in my face. I placed the paper on the table, took a deep breath to calm myself. Looking directly into her triumphant eyes, I slowly took the 83-year IOU and tore it in half, and then in half again. The sound of tearing paper echoed in the silence of the restaurant. Sarah froze. The smirk vanished from her lips, her eyes widened. She clearly hadn't expected me to dare to do that. I crumpled the scraps in my hand and threw them on the table right next to her glass of juice. My voice wasn't loud. I wasn't shouting, but it was cold and sharp as a blade. You take me for a 3-year-old fool. You decided to get rid of me with this flimsy piece of paper. You say you don't have a penny to your name. I pulled out my phone, opened the photos of the bank statements Mike had given me, and placed the screen right in front of Sarah's nose. Now explain this to me. $100,000 that was deposited into your personal account on Tuesday morning. Where did that come from? And $250,000 from your husband's account, which went as a down payment for that Mercedes-Benz GLC parked downstairs. Whose money is that? Sarah's face changed instantly. From red, it turned white, then ashen gray, like a corpse. She began to stutter. Her hands twitched convulsively, accidentally knocking over the glass of orange juice. The juice spilled across the table, drenching her expensive designer dress. Emily, how do you have this? You were following me. You violated my privacy, she shrieked. I smirked coldly, looking at her with contempt. Privacy? When you use money stolen from me to lead a luxurious life, you forfeit your right to privacy. You said you were deep in debt, that loan sharks were after you. But in reality, you're living it up on my blood, sweat, and tears. Do you think the court will believe your pathetic IOU for $100 a month, or these ironclad proofs of money laundering? Sarah trembled all over. All her recent arrogance was gone. Its place was taken by the primal fear of a person backed into a corner. She reached for my phone, trying to snatch it, but I quickly put it back in my bag. I stood up and looked down at her, enunciating each word. I'm giving you exactly 3 days. 3 days to return $500,000 to my account. Every last penny. Whether you sell the car, withdraw your savings, or borrow, I don't care. If the money isn't deposited in 3 days, my complaint, along with all these statements, will land on the detective's desk at the precinct. Sarah opened her mouth. Tears streamed from her eyes. She tried to whine, "Emily, But I raised my hand, cutting her off. Don't call me that. And don't hope that Mark and Mom will save you. Grand larceny, fraud carries up to 10 years in prison. Sister-in-law. Go home and think hard about whether your cheap posturing and handbags are worth spending the best years of your life behind bars." Having said that, I turned and walked to the exit, without once looking back at my sister-in-law, who had slumped in her chair, pale as a sheet. Leaving the restaurant, I turned my face to the bright autumn sun. I felt neither anger nor heaviness. On the contrary, I felt wonderfully light. The outcome of this war was predetermined. 3 days flew by like a flash. And, as I expected, my bank account remained untouched. Not a single penny had been transferred. However, my phone was bombarded with dozens of missed calls from Mark, my mother-in-law, and threateningly pleading messages from Sarah. But I answered no one. Pity shown to the wrong people is a crime against oneself. On the morning of the 4th day, I dressed in a sharp suit, took the thick folder of documents, and drove directly to the district police station to file a complaint. When the duty detective nodded, confirming the seriousness of the evidence provided, and accepted the complaint, I understood the arrow had been shot from the bow. There was no turning back. Subpoenas for questioning were promptly sent to my mother-in-law's address. And that's when the real storm broke, far more destructive than I could have imagined. That same day at noon, as I was consulting a VIP client in our jewelry store, wild screams suddenly erupted outside the panoramic windows. I looked up and froze. My mother-in-law, Susan Davis, stood at the entrance with a homemade sign on which daughter-in-law jails husband's sister, fraudster and thief, was crudely scrawled in red paint. Nearby, some unfamiliar distant relatives paced, pointing fingers and shouting insults. The security guard tried to push them back, but Susan Davis, with an ear-splitting shriek, collapsed onto the asphalt and thrashed hysterically. "Oh, good people, look at her. This daughter-in-law works here. She wears silks. She stripped my daughter bare. Now she's fabricated a case. She wants to put my daughter behind bars. She wants to ruin our whole family. Where is this Emily? Come out, come out. Look a mother in the eyes." Customers in the salon began to whisper, glancing at me suspiciously. My face burned, but not with shame for myself, but with the deepest Spanish shame for this wild family. Instead of repenting for theft and fraud, they chose the lowest, most despicable tactic, to attack my reputation and my work. The store manager looked at me sympathetically. "Emily, go deal with this. Don't scare our clients." I nodded, took a deep breath to calm myself, and walked outside. Seeing me, Susan Davis jumped up from the asphalt and lunged at me, trying to grab my hair, but the security guard managed to block her path. She pointed a crooked finger at me, spitting saliva. "Withdraw the complaint. If you don't, I'll lie down here and die. I'll show the whole world what a viper you are." I looked at this distraught woman and felt only boundless sadness. "Please leave, Mrs. Davis," I said in a steady but firm voice, loud enough for passers-by to hear. I didn't deceive anyone and didn't pressure anyone. I'm simply demanding, by law, what belongs to me. If Sarah and David are innocent before the law, why are you so afraid of the police? Why don't you let the court sort everything out, instead of putting on this circus for the public? My mother-in-law was stunned for a second, but then she shrieked even louder. "How dare you open your mouth? This is your sister-in-law. You want to kill her?" My gaze turned to ice. "I'm not destroying her future. You are, with your blind, motherly love and indulgence of her bottomless greed. You can sit here all evening if you like. It won't change anything. The law isn't a joke." I turned, went back into the salon, and asked the security guard to call the police for disturbing the peace. Behind me, Susan Davis's curses continued to ring out, but they no longer caused me fear. It was merely the death wail of evil, exposed by the light of truth. The police arrived, took my mother-in-law to the station, and issued a fine for disturbing the peace. I thought the harshness of the law would make them retreat, but I was wrong. This silence was only the calm before a much more terrifying storm, a storm aimed at the very heart of human compassion. That same night, as I sat alone in a rented apartment I had left hours under the dim light of a lamp, my phone vibrated. A message from Mark arrived, and with it, a photograph that made my heart clench. The picture showed Sarah. She lay on a pristine white hospital bed, entwined with IV tubes. Her always rosy face was gray, her eyes closed. She looked completely lifeless. Immediately, Mark called. His voice broke, sounding like the muffled sobs of a desperate man. "Emily, I'm begging you, withdraw the complaint. Sarah, she has late-stage liver cancer. The doctors said the metastases have spread throughout her body. There's nothing more that can be done. She has at most a couple of months to live." I froze. The phone almost slipped from my hands. Cancer. The word weighed a ton. It was capable of erasing any grievances and scores. In that second, the image of the bitchy, greedy sister-in-law faded, giving way to the image of a person on the verge of death. Mark continued to plead. His crying echoed through the phone. "She's so remorseful, Emily. In her delirium, she keeps calling for you, begging for forgiveness, wants to return the gold, but it's too late. Do a good deed, let her go peacefully. Don't make her spend her last days in fear of prison. I'm begging you, Emily." I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind in chaos. On one side of the scale, justice and my honor, for which I had fought so hard. On the other, a human life and familial ties, however broken. Was this true? Or another cruel spectacle to avoid punishment? But looking at that photograph, at the cold medical equipment, my iron resolve cracked. I didn't sleep that night, tormented by doubts. If Sarah was really dying, what was the point of lawsuits? Wouldn't I become a cold-blooded monster, finishing off a mortally ill person? But if I backed down, who would answer for my tears and humiliations? News of stage 4 cancer spread throughout the family like wildfire. My phone was bombarded with messages from distant aunts and uncles. They called me a venomous snake who had driven my sister-in-law to a fatal illness. The public pressure suffocated me, but it was this excessive showmanship that planted a seed of doubt in my mind. The next morning, I decided to personally go to the hospital, the address Mark had given me, to verify everything. It was a large public clinical hospital. The corridors reeked of chlorine. Heavy sighs of tired patients could be heard. I put on a medical mask, pulled down my cap, and with a pounding heart, approached room number 305. The door was slightly ajar. I cautiously peered inside. Sarah lay on the bed with her back to the door, covered with a white blanket. She looked so small and pathetic. Next to her sat Susan Davis, peeling an apple and wiping away tears from time to time. This scene should have moved me, but one detail stopped me at the threshold. As soon as my mother-in-law took a thermos and went into the corridor for hot water, all of Sarah's ailing appearance instantly vanished. She sprang up vigorously on the bed, pulled out a huge bucket of spicy KFC chicken wings from under her pillow. The smell of fried oil immediately overpowered the chlorine scent. She greedily bit into a chicken leg, simultaneously staring at her phone. Her fingers furiously tapped the screen, and her grease-smeared lips spewed choice curses. Apparently, she was losing a mobile game. I froze in the doorway, feeling blood rush to my head. A patient with late-stage liver cancer, with one foot in the grave, devouring greasy fast food? Looking at her rosy face and lips glistening with grease, I saw no trace of emaciation or pain. It turned out this was all just a grand scam, playing on my compassion. They stopped at nothing, even hiding behind a fabricated fatal illness just to avoid accountability. All my pity evaporated, replaced by absolute, crystalline disgust. I pulled out my phone and, through the crack in the door, videotaped the dying woman appetizingly gnawing on chicken bones. Then I quietly retreated and melted into the crowd before my mother-in-law returned. With this precious video, I didn't rush home. I went down to the first floor, to the main lobby of the hospital. My intuition told me that this performance required serious financial investment, and who was paying for the banquet? My husband, of course. I hid behind a massive column and watched. Literally 15 minutes later, I saw Mark. He walked up to the paid services desk, nervously looking around, and handed the cashier a stack of papers. Then he pulled out a bank card. It was the gold card for our joint account, the very savings I had put aside for home renovations for my parents. Waiting for Mark to leave, I approached the window. The cashier was still printing receipts. I put on a frightened face. "Excuse me, miss. My husband just paid for my sister-in-law Sarah's treatment, but he forgot to get the detailed bill for insurance. Could you print a duplicate?" "I'm a relative." The cashier looked at me with doubt, but my sincere, concerned look worked. She printed a copy and handed it to me. I glanced at the paper, and the very first line almost made me laugh aloud at their incredible audacity. No chemotherapy, no radiation, no expensive cancer drugs. The receipt clearly stated, comprehensive VIP organism checkup, stay in a premium comfort service ward, premium meals from an individual menu. The total for several days exceeded $1,000. It turned out Mark wasn't just lying to me about his sister's illness. He was brazenly spending my money to pay for Sarah's resort stay. They had turned the hospital into a hotel, and me into a cash cow, extracting money and pity. I crumpled the receipt in my fist. This thin piece of paper, sharper than a razor, finally severed the last threads connecting me to my husband. "Mark, you love your sister. You want to protect your family. That's your right. But your mistake is that you trampled trust and sacrificed your wife to feed this rotten lie." I carefully smoothed the receipt and hid it in my purse. This would be the second piece of evidence, along with the KFC chicken video, to unmask them to the whole world. Apparently, feeling unsafe in the public clinic or simply wanting more comfort, that same night they secretly moved Sarah to a private Elite Care Medical Center, a place popularly called a 5-star hotel with doctors, where a day in a room costs exorbitant money. I found out about this not from detectives, but thanks to Sarah's insatiable thirst for fame and showmanship. In the evening, scrolling through my social media feed, I came across a notification. Sarah had started a live stream. The title screamed with drama, "Last Days of Battling Cancer. Please share to get justice." Out of curiosity, I joined the broadcast, and what I saw caused a mixture of laughter and disgust. Sarah lay on a luxurious medical bed, covered with pristine, ironed white linen. She applied a pale filter to her face to appear emaciated. Tears stood in her eyes. Her voice trembled and broke. "Friends, I'm in so much pain. The doctors said I won't make it, and my sister-in-law, she won't leave me alone, suing me, cornering me in my last days. I only want one thing: for my good name to be cleared before I die." In the comments, hundreds of trusting viewers sent crying emojis, cursed me, calling me a monster, and even asked for her card number to send money for the poor girl's treatment. Sarah occasionally glanced at the viewer counter, and a triumphant smirk, which she futilely tried to hide, flickered at the corners of her lips. But you can't hide a needle in a sack, and liars often slip up on small details. Caught up in her acting, Sarah didn't notice that the phone camera captured a reflection in the enormous panoramic window of the room. Through the cloudy reflection in the glass, I clearly saw the silhouette of a man sprawled in a deep leather armchair in the corner of the room. It was David. In one hand, he held a glass of red wine, in the other, a chicken leg. He chewed, shaking his foot, and watched the flat-screen TV on the wall. He looked as if he was vacationing at a resort in Dubai, not on duty at the bedside of his wife dying of cancer. The contrast between the dying wife in the foreground and the husband enjoying himself in the background was so absurd that it was hard to believe. I quickly started screen recording, zooming in on David's reflection. My blood boiled. They had not only deceived me and the law. Now they were brazenly deceiving thousands of sympathetic people for likes and donations. These were no longer internal family squabbles. This had become a large-scale fraud. I turned off my phone and looked out the dark window. "Well, Sarah," I whispered, "you like playing to an audience so much. I'll give you a bigger stage. Let the whole world admire your true face." I didn't waste a second. I immediately contacted my lawyer and a notary to draw up a protocol for examining the evidence, preparing for the final act of this play. We arrived at Elite Care Medical Center, just as Sarah was conducting another live stream. I stood at the door of the VIP room and could clearly hear her sobbing, complaining of excruciating pain, and begging for justice before death. I signaled my lawyer to get ready and decisively pushed open the door. The heavy oak door swung open. Before me lay a scene surpassing any surrealism. Sarah, with pale makeup, lay on the bed, holding her phone at arm's length, while in the corner, David still sat in the armchair, sipping wine to quiet music. Seeing me and the unfamiliar people in suits, Sarah flinched so hard she almost dropped her phone. She reached to press the end broadcast button, but I was faster. I walked right up to her and said loudly, so all her viewers could hear, "Don't turn it off, Sarah. Your viewers sympathize with you so much. They should know the whole truth about your stage 4. Sarah turned ashen. "Why did you come here? Do you want to finish me off right here?" I didn't answer. I calmly placed a stack of documents on the table, in front of the camera, and began to leaf through them, enunciating each word in the hollow silence of the VIP room. "This is the original medical record from the public hospital you so hastily fled from yesterday. Blood tests, ultrasounds, CT scans, everything shows that you are perfectly healthy. No liver tumors, let alone metastases." I pulled out the payment receipt made by Mark, and this is the check for your services from that same hospital. Paid from our joint account with my husband, VIP checkup and premium meals. You're sick with cancer, yet you're eating fried chicken and drinking wine in a room costing thousands of dollars a day, paid for with money stolen from me. In the broadcast chat, madness erupted. Sympathetic comments instantly turned into curses and accusations of fraud. David, realizing things were getting serious, jumped up and lunged at me to snatch the phone. But my lawyer stepped forward, harshly blocking his path and warning him of criminal liability for assault. I pointed a finger at David, looking directly into the camera lens. "Look closely. Here is the grieving husband of a dying woman. He's drinking fine wine and enjoying himself, while his wife is begging for money on live stream." Sarah shrieked like a banshee. "Shut up, you monster! I'll kill you!" She lunged at me with her fists, but I easily pushed her hand away. My gaze was colder than ice. "You've played your part. The show is over. All these documents and today's broadcast will become aggravating circumstances in your case of grand larceny, fraud, and you'll also have to answer for collecting funds through deception." I turned and left the room, leaving behind Sarah's hysterical screams and David's panic. I knew that beyond that door, a storm of public anger and justice awaited them. The incident with the hospital broadcast had the effect of a bombshell. Edited video clips spread across all social media channels. Mark's family became a laughingstock and an object of hatred across the internet. Mark called my phone repeatedly, but I didn't answer. I needed silence to prepare for the next steps and simply to give my heart a rest after all these traumas. That evening, Mark came to my parents' house, where I was staying. He stood at the gate, unshaven, haggard, with huge bags under his eyes. He had aged 10 years in those couple of days. Mom didn't want to open the door, but I asked her not to interfere. I had to put a final stop to it. I went out to him. In his eyes, there was no longer that pathetic pleading, only absolute despair and frightening stubbornness. The first thing he asked concerned not how I felt, but his precious family. "Emily, you've dragged our entire family through the mud. Mom's fainting. Sarah is being cursed on the streets. Are you satisfied?" I leaned against the cold metal gate and smiled bitterly. "Satisfied? Do you think it gives me pleasure to air this publicly? You yourselves backed me into this corner. Your greed and lies destroyed your reputation, not me. I'm just protecting what belongs to me." Mark clenched his fists, veins bulging on his forehead. "Protecting? All you care about is money and your vaunted justice. What about family? Our marriage? Mom said if you don't withdraw the complaint and publicly apologize to Sarah, to somehow restore her reputation, we're getting a divorce." I froze, not from fear of the word divorce, but from shock at their boundless audacity. Even now, with all the evidence laid out, they dared to blackmail me with our marriage, demanding that I take the blame for the thieves. "Is that your ultimatum?" I asked, so evenly that Mark was even taken aback. "Yes," he nodded. His voice trembled, but he tried to appear strong. "I'm the oldest son. I can't abandon my family to be torn apart. If you're not willing to sacrifice yourself for your husband's family, you're not worthy of being my wife. Choose. Either court or us. I looked into the eyes of the man I once loved, with whom I planned to grow old. Now, before me, stood a cowardly weakling. A puppet in the hands of his mother and sister, devoid of honor and dignity. I took off my wedding ring from my ring finger and placed it in his palm. The cold metal touched his skin, and he flinched. I choose divorce, I said clearly and loudly. I'm returning you to your family. I'm returning to you your blind, idiotic filial devotion. I will not withdraw the complaint. Moreover, I will attach to it facts about charity fraud and defamation. We'll meet in court. I turned and walked into the yard. The iron gates clanged shut behind me, putting an end to 5 years of marriage, full of tears and humiliation. On the day of the trial, it poured rain. The gray sky seemed to mourn the collapse of a family once considered decent. I arrived at the courthouse with my lawyer, dressed immaculately, with my head held high. I was no longer that submissive and patient wife. From the other side, Sarah and David were brought into the courtroom. Handcuffs gleamed coldly on their wrists. They looked gaunt, aged. Not a trace of their glamour or pomp remained. The trial passed more quickly than I expected. The evidence I and the investigators had gathered was ironclad. Records from Golden Standard Pawn, bank statements proving money laundering, forged medical certificates, and the video of that shameful live stream. All of it left no stone unturned in their defense. The defendant's lawyer tried to appeal to their difficult financial situation and legal illiteracy, asking for leniency. But against the prosecutor's ironclad arguments, it sounded pathetic. Sarah stood at the podium, sobbing hysterically, blaming everything on circumstances and debts. But not once, not a single word, did she apologize to me, the main victim of her crime. Susan Davis sat in the spectator section, clutching her heart. She constantly moaned and cast hateful glances at me. Mark sat next to his mother, his head bowed so low that he seemed to be staring at the floor. His shoulders shook. I didn't know if he was crying out of pity for his sister or shame for his own cowardice. When the judge rose to deliver the verdict, a dead silence fell in the courtroom. The court finds defendant Sarah and defendant David guilty of committing a crime under appropriate U.S. Criminal Code section, for example, Penal Law Section 155.42 for grand larceny in the first degree, and Section 175.35 for offering a false instrument for filing, grand larceny, fraud in an especially large amount, committed by a group of individuals by prior conspiracy, using deception and abuse of trust. The court sentences Sarah to 7 years imprisonment in a state penitentiary, and David to 6 years imprisonment. The court also orders the convicted individuals to fully compensate the victim for material damages in the amount of $500,000 and to compensate for emotional distress. The bang of the judge's gavel marked the end of this story of greed and cruelty. Hearing the sentence, Susan Davis let out an ear-splitting scream and fainted right there in the courtroom. Mark frantically rushed to pick up his mother, watching through tears as his sister was led away by the bailiffs. I looked at this chaos, and there was no joy or gloating in my soul, only a ringing emptiness. A family destroyed, people sent to jail, and all because of bottomless greed and indulgence of evil. If Mark had shown firmness then, if my mother-in-law had raised her daughter properly, this would not have happened. But in life, there is no subjunctive mood. There is only cause and effect. A year has passed since that fateful trial. My life has gradually returned to a calm rhythm. The divorce from Mark proceeded quickly. The court divided the property quite fairly, since it was proven that Mark had secretly spent joint funds to cover up his sister's crime. I received a larger share. Our shared apartment was sold. With that money, plus what was recovered from Sarah and David through collection agencies, I bought myself a cozy, bright apartment in a good neighborhood. I heard that Susan Davis was forced to sell her ancestral summer home to hire lawyers for the appeal and try to pay me back the debt in exchange for a reduced sentence for her daughter. Now she and Mark are renting a tiny studio apartment somewhere far outside the city. Mark was fired from his prestigious firm. The reputational scandal did its damage. Now he drives for Uber day and night to support his mother and bring his sister packages in prison. And David, once in county jail, immediately filed for divorce to shed some of the responsibility, leaving Sarah to rot alone behind bars. Today, I left work early. I drove my small car along the Chicago Riverwalk. The setting sun colored the water in crimson tones, creating an incredibly beautiful landscape. I rolled down the window, allowing the fresh wind to ruffle my hair. I breathed deeply, inhaling the air of freedom and peace. No more tearful dinners, no more intrigues, no more attempts to please others. I pulled over to the side of the road and bought a huge bouquet of peonies from an elderly vendor. Their sweet fragrance reminded me of the past, but it was no longer a bleeding wound. It was just a scar that had stopped hurting. Only by passing through the storm do you truly begin to appreciate the clear sky. The collapse of my marriage was not an end, but a beginning. An opportunity to find myself, to live vibrantly and proudly. My phone vibrated. A message from the CEO. I had been promoted to regional manager of the jewelry store chain for excellent performance this year. I smiled, genuinely, from the bottom of my heart. A long and bright road lay ahead. I would walk it on my own feet, with a kind yet strong heart, and I believe that somewhere out there, true happiness awaits me. Dear listeners, true happiness and peace come only when a woman is financially independent, when she has the courage to fight for truth, and, most importantly, when she knows how to let go of a painful past. The greatest forgiveness is not indulging evil, but forgiving oneself, to move forward with a clear conscience towards a better future. We hope this story gave you food for thought. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon and leave a comment to support heartfelt stories. Thank you for being with us. See you in the next stories.